So as Gerald said, I am Bud Parr, and I run the JAMstack Meetup here in New York City, which I've been doing since 2014. I've been doing that because I love lightweight, composable architectures and all the benefits that come along with that. Somewhere along the line, I became obsessed with things like web performance, and then most recently, I've become kind of obsessed or nutty about my own environmental impact. So um, I haven't given a speech like this, any kind of talk, in at least 2 years now. So forgive me if I feel a little bit rusty. But the fact is I don't even like public speaking. Maybe nobody does, but I don't like it. I don't like doing this. But I've been doing it since 2014. Only when I really feel like there's something I gotta say, when it's necessary. Um, and this is why. Like probably most of you, I'm a big believer in technology to solve the world's problems. I think that technology can bridge gaps between people. I think that it can do a lot of things more efficient, say, rather than jumping in your big car, going to the air-conditioned mall and buying your clothes, you can buy that online, right? And have it delivered to your doorstep much more efficiently. But I always kind of took it for granted, that one was using a lot of energy and another would have been less. But I never really thought about the impact of what we were doing on the web until recently. So we all know that climate change is an issue. It's becoming ever more critical, and it feels a little hopeless, right? Because we know that, our politicians aren't doing anything about it. And it feels like our individual actions are just a small drop in a large, ocean of problems. But here's a little perspective, though. If you think about this, if you think about our industry that accounts for 4% of global CO2 emissions, that's about the same as the civil aviation industry. And for them to improve in that industry, they've got to come up with new fuels, reconfigure, multi-million-dollar planes and that sort of thing. We can have an impact just by making simple changes to our day-to-day workflow. So, and that's what I want to talk a little bit about. And I didn't really think that I could have much of an impact until I found this community, climateaction.tech. And it's populated full of all people in technology who are trying to solve these problems, who it's like the brightest minds figuring this stuff out. And they share a lot of resources there. And that kind of empowered me. And everything I know about this topic so far, I learned from people in that community. So first off, we have to measure what we're doing. And we have to, importantly in this case, because it can be a little bit confusing, we have to kind of understand what we're measuring, right? So what factors influence a website? And this could be a web application or a standard website or anything like that. What are the factors that go into this? So it's a little bit complicated, but it starts with something very basic, something that we're all very aware of. Is data transfer. You can see that in DevTools in your browser. So, that's the starting point for this. And obviously, the more you're transferring, the more impact you're going to have. But when we're measuring this, we measure it on first-time basis and repeat basis for repeat visitors and that sort of thing. And then we convert that into what that means in terms of CO2. And then we have to think a little bit about how that energy, what the actual impact is, right? So we all have our devices. There's a cost, a carbon cost, if you will, to produce these devices, and a cost when you get rid of them, to recycle them and that sort of thing. And then, of course, there's the cost of running the device. There's energy that it takes to keep it charged up and run it every day, as we do. So then we have to think about getting data to and from the device. So that would be all the routers that are around the world, transferring data here and there. And then lastly, we have to think about all the servers where the data resides at. And not only just those servers, I mean, these are massive data farms. This is probably one of the biggest parts. These massive server farms, but also keeping them cool and that sort of thing, and their energy impact. So what are the tools that we're using to measure our carbon output? So the first one is website carbon.com. This site was started some years ago. It's an established site, and they've cycled through several iterations. So it's really honed in on and getting as accurate data as you possibly can. And it's also designed nicely. It's very usable for people, for a non-technical person to kind of come and have a sense of, oh, you can't see it, but this is Allbirds, who is actually supposed to be a very, carbon forward company, but maybe they can do a little bit better there. But anyway, so the site is very attractively designed and kind of gives you some reference points so that you can kind of understand what this actually means in terms of energy. And actually, in some ways, like 9 trees, that might be actionable for you, right? There's another one, if you're a developer, that you might feel a little more comfortable with, which I like. It's called Beacon. And you can change some of the data points to measure your total carbon output over a course of a year by using an accurate number for visitors and whether those visitors are new and returning. And then importantly, you can see down here that we get a breakdown of, what's using the most energy, right? And here is obviously 63, scripts that are using a lot of energy. So that's another one. EcoGrader will feel familiar to those of you who use Lighthouse. It's very prescriptive. It gives you a lot of things that you can do to go through and improve your site right on the page. So it doesn't just say, you're using energy you need to improve. It tells you exactly what you can do. And this one, I think, is great. It's called Are My Third Parties Green.com. And so not only does it tell you, okay, you're making a lot of requests, which is important in and of itself, but it tells you about those requests to see if those are served from green hosts, right? So in this case, they're not. So I think that's really an important piece of the puzzle. And then there are a couple of programmatic options. Sitespeed.io is a open source suite of tools that you can use, and they have a plugin for sustainability. And then CO2.js is also the JavaScript that runs many of these other sites. So these tools have evolved a lot over the years. They've fine-tuned, and CO2.js is probably where you want to go if you want to be doing this programmatically. So what do we do with this information now that we've calculated our carbon impact? Well, it's not a pretty picture. So this is the use of assets over the last 10 years, and you can see that it has not improved. A lot of us who've been talking about web performance over the years see this and get a little sad. The web is getting more complex and more bloated every day. So there's definitely work that we can be doing here. But I think in the case of carbon, we're going to see a lot more. If you work for a company, you're going to have a lot more pressure to do something about this situation, because now even the SEC is requiring a level of transparency from companies, and they have these different scope levels of what they have to do, report in terms of their energy impact, and a company's website is part of the Scope 3 reporting requirements. So this is something that everybody's going to be aware of all the way through a business. And I think also, Google highlights companies that are green on their search results and that sort of thing. And if anybody can start to influence behavior of people who own websites, it's probably Google and the SEC. So now we've measured our footprint, and we kind of need to think about, what we want to do about it. The first thing that we're seeing right now is a period where people are creating low carbon websites. This feels a little to me like when mobile was first a thing. We had M.dot websites, a special website just off into the side that was just for mobile. Some of those exist now, but it was a thing for a while and everybody was doing that. It was really hard. That was before we had, websites, I forgot the name for it, but websites that move up and down when you were, depending on what device you're on. So this is a great effort, and they're doing a lot of information on here. But I kind of feel like nobody's really going to choose to use this off of their instead of their regular website, which is full of pretty pictures and it's easy to navigate and that sort of thing. And you can see here that the UX on this is just terrible. Nobody's going to use this. But from these experiments has arisen a set of rules. And I don't actually like to think of them as rules, but more aspirations, right? Or guidelines or even considerations, a starting point. Not all of them are realistic, particularly in a business sense. I mean, I have a client who does nothing but make videos. We are, of course, going to have videos on our website. But if we take these elements, and I'm not going to go into all of them right now, that's beyond the scope of what we're trying to do tonight, but if we take each of these and we start to think about how we can influence them, our impact is going to be better, right? So that's a starting place. And like I said, an aspirational starting point. But we are seeing some creativity, right? So this is a VW site. You can't see the thing because I guess the screen, but this is a site by Volkswagen, and you can see that this is ASCII art. And if you go to the actual live website, it's pretty nice. It's really well done. I found myself looking, Googling like how to make ASCII art, but it's really nicely done. But to my mind, it's the starting of creativity, the starting of ways to be a little bit more thoughtful about what we're creating, right? From there, and I wanted to mention, too, that I saw recently a blog post, and I'll have links to all of this stuff that I can share with people, but a blog post on the AWWW Awards, whatever that site is, about all the alternative ways that you can create visualizations that are less heavy than what people have been doing in the past. So I think really it just requires a certain amount of thoughtfulness and starting from a lower place and building up from based on what you need. And then, of course, when we're thinking about carbon output, we're starting, like I said, with the point of data transfer, right? So the rules here are the same rules that we try to use for improving our websites and performance. So we have tools like web page test that can, and I don't mean to call out Allbirds, that was a little bit random, but they could do a little bit better job on their website. But we can use tools like web page tests that will allow us to go in and they'll suggest very specific things that you can do, and you can test them right on their website. It's a fantastic resource. So you can use this to improve your website's performance, and by doing so, you'll improve your site's carbon output. Same thing goes with Lighthouse, but I think this is a little bit more, more impactful. And of course, I mean, this is the JAMstack Meetup. So, by pre-rendering your site, you are saving, logic being run on every page load on the server. So I'm going to leave that there, but that is definitely the way to go. Pre-rendering when you can, as much as you can, is definitely a good thing to be doing. And then lastly, and this is critical, is to choose a green host. Unfortunately, that's a little bit complicated because even a host that says, well, I'm green, they may or may not be green. There's a thing called greenwashing that you've probably heard about and that sort of thing. And it might be that they're planting some trees or something like that. That doesn't really mean that they're green. And it's further complicated by the fact that any host today has probably data centers in different places. And each of those data centers has an energy mix. It's based on the local sources of energy. So there's things that they can control and things that they can't. And there are actually very few data centers today, like in Iceland or someplace like that, where they're really, 100% run on renewable energy. So a lot of this is a mix of offsets and pushing towards renewable energy, but also being efficient. So Google, and fortunately, I think that a lot of the big players are doing this, right? So Google Cloud allows you to pick a data center in their control panel that they'll report on, which is more green or not, and they'll let you switch to and from different data centers. And you can do it in different times. It's very active. You can do it right there. Companies like Cloudflare are allowing you to block unnecessary bots. So it's like this idea of catching little pieces of efficiency wherever you can. Blocking bots can, reduce sites traffic by a lot, but it's all unnecessary traffic. So people are handling this, but you need to actually choose a green host. I think there's the Green Web Foundation, lists many of them, but most of the hosts, if they are green, will say so, and they need to be held accountable. And everybody who's not needs to be. And I think that that's one area where we as a technology community can be vocal about our choices and let people know that that's important to us. I know that we host a lot of sites with Netlify, and they're partially green, and it's a little bit difficult for them because they use different infrastructure from different companies and that sort of thing. But people have been very vocal about it over the years, pushing them towards this and making sure that they know that it's important. So, and lastly, I think that it's really about being thoughtful, trying to find efficiencies wherever you can. I know at my firm, we've made a habit of reducing our builds. So we used to just, every time, we'd have a commit or something, who cares, it's a build. And we started to think about this, that we're using a lot of server resources all the time when we didn't need to. So we've cut back on that. And so it's about finding these little places of efficiency that you can, and that will add up over time. And interestingly, I think this is kind of interesting. This is called the Jevons paradox, where you can actually make your site more efficient and end up outputting more carbon because more people are using your site. So, I mean, now that's, there are worse problems, right? But, it's kind of something to kind of think about in terms of what you're doing. But if you want to go that far, there are things that you can do. And the offset world has changed a lot over the years. It used to be, plant a tree someplace, and that's a very slow path to actually making a difference. But now there are a lot of companies who are seeking to do actual carbon removal from the atmosphere. And I think that can have a great impact. So here, this is one, it's blocking the name from the screen here. I'm sorry, but I think I have it listed on the slide, in the last slide. But I think that them and Stripe Climate is funding a lot of these carbon removal projects, and you can either do that. We do the Stripe's 1% thing, where we contribute our revenues towards funding carbon removal, but you can also just go and donate to it and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of opportunities for that if you want to try to go all the way with what you're doing. So here are most of the things that I talked about in the talk, and I can post these on Twitter or Meetup or what have you, or maybe on the YouTube. I would highly suggest, as a starting point, this course. It's very short, the Principles of Sustainable Software Engineering, that Microsoft has online. It's really informative, and whether you're a designer or a developer, it says software engineer, but it doesn't matter. It gives you kind of this basis of the things that I was talking about, where your climate impact comes from. So I highly recommend that, and I highly recommend climateaction.tech, which I mentioned before. They have a very active Slack. And that's it. I don't know if we have time for questions or what, but thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Sure. You hinted at Scope 3 as a federal...
Oh, I was afraid somebody was going to ask me about that.
Okay, I'll shift from there.
Well, you can ask.
Yeah.
But
well, what have you seen succeed with developing
Right.
That doesn't really, the programmatic approaches are probably better for websites that are being updated on a more regular basis.
Yeah.
Have you seen any kind of tooling or combination that is working for teams?
Even in terms of measuring, or?
Right, so like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And,
There's companies
right.
that are popping up. I don't have the names of them here, but I'm happy to give them to you. But like Google has funded a big company that's doing this, and they're popping up. Not just they're focused on a company's entire footprint, not just the web. And I don't know how they're managing that part, but yeah. So that's that is going to be a very big business.
Right.
Just measuring this.
Scope 3, I believe, is intended to include a measurement of the impact of the silicon.
Yeah, it's.
So I think some of those things are still.
Yeah, it's all very comprehensive. It's actually pretty impressive. And I went to a conference with the Green Web Foundation, and they had Etsy there as kind of a poster child of scope 3 and measurement and getting right out in front of that and that sort of thing. And I talked to them about some of the things that they're doing, because it's not just their website; it's the whole cycle. About how to for them, say, delivering and that sort of thing. And these are all big things, but they're having to do it, right? They're having to do it because of the SEC.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.